Welcome. This is the Midlife Rising podcast. Today, Jen and I are exploring a side of menopause that we haven't really talked enough about and a part that we don't really hear anybody else talking about. Sure, hormones change, sometimes show up, but beneath that, there's something else really profound happening. For years, in our 20s and 30s, sex hormones play a role other than reproduction as well. They act like invisible protectors. They cushion us from stress and disease. And they even hide misalignment between our human selves and our soul. So we're going to talk more about that. These are places where our outer life isn't really matching our inner intuition. Now, when the hormones begin to fade or begin to shift as they do in midlife, that buffer, that protective aspect, it disappears. And what's been hidden for years, decades even, comes rushing to the surface. So in this episode, we're going to talk about how menopause isn't just a physical transition, it's actually a spiritual awakening, calling us to live in alignment with what our soul really desires, who we really are. So if you want that, then keep on listening. You're a woman over 40 who spent your life being the one who holds it all together. But now your body's changing and your soul is done pretending everything is fine. Welcome to Midlife Rising. We're your hosts, Sherry and Jen, twin sisters and modern medicine women, here to help you rewire your stress response, balance your hormones, and reclaim your feminine power. Every episode is a rebellion against the rules you never agreed to and a return to yourself. Join us where midlife isn't a crisis, it's a catalyst. Welcome back. Okay, today Jen and I are going to open up about our own journeys through perimenopause. And we're going to talk about the sometimes messy, confusing, and surprising chapters, because they really do sometimes feel like chapters, that no one really prepared us for. And we're going to show some personal stories that revealed just how deeply our emotions and spirit and soul are connected to the symptoms that our bodies actually feel. And when you start to see the link, you're going to realize as well that menopause isn't just a physical transition. It's actually a whole body, a whole life, even transformation. And you'll see in this episode that when you start to look at menopause this way, you are going to set yourself up for health far beyond menopause. Because this isn't just about menopause. It's about the rest of your life, this last or second, or I don't know what we want to call it, chapter. And we want you to feel that. Jen, we were talking before this, as we usually do. And I know you have a personal story that we both do, but I think yours is a really great example that will help people to see how the messages from the body show up in midlife and how to kind of interpret them. Okay. One of the things that I experienced when I was going through perimenopause was bladder infections, UTIs, or urinary tract infections. And for some women, they're like dreaded UTIs, and they're quite common in midlife. So I've had them like a few times throughout my life. Physically, they tend to come from having sex. And we get them more often in perimenopause because we're getting dry down there. So there's a lot more uncomfortable stuff happening down below. So I got a bladder infection. I got it the fun way. For anyone that hasn't had one, you haven't had one ever, have you? No, never. Okay, so here's what it feels like. It feels like your pee is on fire. And it feels like you have to go constantly. Mm-hmm. It's awful. And because it's a bacteria that has gotten in there, it can sometimes be accompanied by fever or even feeling kind of fluish, which is the way I felt in this one. And a number of times I did. So got this UTI, went to the doctor, got some antibiotics, and
it was supposed to go away from the antibiotics, as they usually do. And it didn't. It went away sort of enough that I could bear it. Like I just felt like I had to go all the time. It didn't feel so burny anymore. But it never went away. And I went back to the doctor and I got retested and he said, there's no bacteria. So you're done. Sorry.
Can I just stop you there for a quick sec, Jen? Because I actually, I have a lot of friends who go through this where they've, they're getting recurrent UTIs or it never feels like it's really truly gone. And they go to the doctor and tests show that there's nothing there. So I just wanted to highlight that because I think that is actually really common.
Could be. Yeah. This is a conversation we haven't really had with our clients all that much.
No, that's true. We haven't talked about this one enough.
Yeah. So I went on a mission to try to find whatever supplements and other options that I could find. So the typical ones out there are D-mannose, cranberry, of course. And the other thing that I did is I went to my Chinese doctor. So every 2 weeks, I had an appointment with my Chinese doctor and she would give me a bunch of herbs and do some acupuncture, and it would go away for about 2 weeks. And towards the end of those 2 weeks, it would start coming back. And I can't even tell you how frustrating. This went on for months. Like it was 6 to 8 months. And this happened to me 3 times. It really felt like torture. And along with it, there were other symptoms that came along with it, which I started to notice. So I had, when I woke up with one, I'd always kind of wake up with it in the morning. I would also wake up with a very, I couldn't think straight, a really foggy brain. Exhaustion.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So those also went kind of alongside of it.
The foggy brain is interesting.
My Chinese doctor explained it this way. She said, first of all, she kept asking me how stressed out I was. And I'd be like, I don't know, 7 out of 10, I think. This was at a time I was quite stressed. I was actually a 10 out of 10 on stress and didn't realize how burnt out I was.
Mm-hmm.
She kept telling me, you don't have any juice, was the way she put it. It's dampness in your lower pelvis area, and your body needs to lift that dampness up into your head. Lift the dampness out, and the energy has to go up into your head. So that's why the foggy brain was associated with this dampness in my body. You shouldn't have that much dampness in your body. You should have a balance between dampness and dryness. And in Chinese medicine, between cold and heat, there should also be a balance. And mine was way out of whack.
And what did she mean by juice? Is that qi?
Yes. Yeah. And it just energy. She was like, there's no qi in your body. And I also went to a couple other alternative modalities, and they would just say, you're completely burnt out. Your adrenals are burnt out. There's no qi in your body. And I just kept going. There was one day that I woke up and couldn't get out of bed with this thing. And it was the first day after a holiday. I had come up, this would happen every time I came back from a good weekend away on the Monday while I was traveling back. It would hit me full on.
Yep. I remember talking about this a while back.
And so there was the day after, it was the day after New Year's, and I was starting work again. I was starting work, which was a consulting job, my academic teaching. I was teaching at a college, and my PhD. So I was coming back after a week's vacation and couldn't even get out of bed. So I stayed in bed for a couple of hours, tried to get up and go sit at my desk, tried to do some reading for my thesis, and then had to go back to bed, and then kept getting up. And eventually I pushed through, and I sort of got through it. I muscled my way through. Still felt the UTI, still felt the foggy brain. I just kept pushing through.
Hands up, listeners, if you've done this, muscled through whether it's a UTI or some other symptom, some other sickness, illness, whatever.
Yeah. So the other thing my Chinese doctor kept telling me is, she said, we know there's no bacteria there. You've been tested, and this is not caused by bacteria. This is caused by the fact that you are burnt out. And so then share what you and I have learned since then. So this was 4 years ago, is that before we hit perimenopause, our hormones are shielding us from these. So estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone work together to help protect our bodies from disease and from stress and from a lot of things that happen in our bodies, like illness, ailments. And this was one way that my drop in hormones, because I was going through perimenopause at the time, my drop in sex hormones stopped shielding me from this disease. And the second thing that was happening was my adrenals were so burnt out that my adrenals weren't taking over in producing the precursors to those hormones. So like estrogen is made and released by your fat cells, but your fat cells need the precursor that is made by your adrenal glands.
Estrogen is actually made by a lot of different parts of your body, which I don't think most people know.
Yeah, that's true.
We know that our ovaries make estrogen, but estrogen is actually made by all kinds of other parts of your body.
And we've talked about this before, that your adrenals are need to take over some of the production process when you are going through perimenopause. My adrenals were so burnt out, they couldn't take over. So there wasn't any estrogen in my body that was protecting me from this. So there was certainly a physical aspect to this that was happening. And I was so burnt out that my body couldn't heal. Like my immune system was shot. I was getting sick all the time with other things.
Yeah.
With everything that my kid brought home. I got sick, and she'd get sick for a couple of days and I'd get sick for 3 weeks.
When you are stressed, and most women are, whether you think that you're the 7 out of 10 or the 10 out of 10, we are all under an enormous amount of pressure that we're not even recognizing. But when that happens, when we're in fight or flight or freeze or fawn, your body's releasing cortisol and adrenaline. And those hormones, the whole purpose of them is to tell your body to shut down all those non-essential functions, like digestion, like the immune system, sex drive, the reproduction, your breathing changes. Like those hormones affect all of those systems so that it can send all this energy to your muscles so that you can fight or flee, and to your brain so that you can think about, like, so that you go into like, okay, there's a threat, move or freeze or whatever it is. So there's no energy left. People have gut issues and immune system issues, and they don't connect that to adrenal burnout. Well, it's because your body's shut those down if you're full of cortisol.
Yeah. So that was what was happening physically in my body. So now I wanted to talk about how I came to the realization that this was also a spiritual problem.
Well, can we just take a step back, Jen? And maybe we should talk a little bit about the actual roles that those sex hormones play so people can kind of start to connect those dots.
Okay. So estrogen shields the cardiovascular system, the bones, the brain from stress and disease. So it's like it buffers the effects of cortisol. And actually, so does progesterone. Like progesterone is needed to produce GABA, which you can take as a supplement, which is a natural anti-anxiety agent. So it soothes the nervous system. Estrogen and progesterone work together to keep your body calm under pressure. And as we know, you can feel stressed from so many different things, right? You can feel stressed from your situation, but stress can also build up in your body if you are not aligned with what your soul actually wants. So if you're saying yes to a whole bunch of things that your body actually wants to say no to, and you're feeling resentment about that, and you're feeling tired about that, that's stress because you're misaligned with what you truly desire.
It's inner conflict. And I think most of us are actually, there's times when we're not really aware, but if we pay attention, we actually know when we're saying yes to something we really want to say no to. And it does cause stress.
Yeah. So then we also have testosterone, which supports our motivation and assertiveness. So this is the hormone that helps us navigate life's challenges. Really, it helps us take action. So that's the motivation part, and it supports vitality.
Yeah, that's something we don't talk a lot about. Like, we know testosterone provides us with sex drive, but it's testosterone that invites us to take action.
Yes. And if you go back to last episode where we talked about masculine and feminine energies, that's exactly why men have more masculine energy in their body, because they have more testosterone than we do. But we need a little bit of that to actually get through life.
Yeah. We did this book in book club called She's Not Here. And I'll have to get the name of the author because I can't remember. But it's a book about a man who goes through a transition to become a woman. And what was really fascinating, it's a true story. It's a memoir. And what was really fascinating was that once the man started taking like female sex hormones and had some of the physical surgeries done, he described, or she now described, the changes in emotions, and like he actually felt all these changes in thinking, in emotions, in reactions. It was really interesting because we think that those things have to do with personality. And a lot of the time they actually have to do with hormones,
which we know because we talk about emotions and all that, and we know that women are more emotional, but that is so interesting. We have to put that book in the show notes.
Yeah.
That just kind of brings it all together, that these hormones, from a spiritual standpoint, they allow us to tolerate misalignment between what our actions are and what we're truly feeling, and what we're truly know, like our inner wisdom. So we can get through the first, decades of our adult life, over-serving, people pleasing, perfecting everything, pushing through, even though we know intuitively that we need a rest, for example. But we can keep doing it because we have these hormones protecting us. Suddenly, when we hit perimenopause and those hormones drop, we're less able to tolerate this misalignment between our soul and our actions.
Well, and it's the misalignment that's causing the drop in the first place. Because your estrogen, like it's the ovaries that drop their production of estrogen. So, but the only reason we feel an overall drop in estrogen is because the adrenals aren't kicking in and to their production of the precursor. And it's this constant conflict of, I want to do this, but I don't really want to do this. I think I should do this, but I don't really want to.
That's so true. It's a vicious cycle.
Yeah.
As everything is in our body.
Right. And by the time the ovaries begin their drop in production, then you're already set up for symptoms.
Very true. So this is why the spiritual part of menopause is so important. Like we can say, like, of course, you and I think spirituality is important because we love it and it's personal growth and I'm fascinated by it. And it's what's helped me get through the symptoms.
Yeah. And we have a couple more examples that will help to sort of show, some different ways that this can show up, because UTIs is one, but there's like all kinds of other things. But what I was going to say about that was, when we talk about spirituality, I think we've talked about it enough, but I feel the need to just reiterate that it's not about religion. It's about connection. It's about spirituality of your own understanding. It's not going to church. It's not necessarily. That might be for one person, but if you're someone who does not feel like you have a religion or a background in that, or you're not resonating with this word spiritual because you don't go to church or because you don't believe in the Bible or because, those things, you can still be a spiritual person without all of that.
Yes. So in this case, it was we share a spiritual coach, guru, who helped me actually figure this out. So actually, it was a whole combination of people. So I had a Chinese doctor, an Irish Chinese doctor in South Africa, who said the very first time that I went to him for a UTI, he said to me, "Who are you pissed off at?" And I went, "Oh,
literally."
Yeah. And I went, "Oh, I know exactly." And I knew exactly who it was in that moment. And this was way before perimenopause. And that UTI went fairly quickly without the need for antibiotics. Like my Chinese doctor healed it. So in this case, like the 6-month long one, or actually it might even be longer, I had to go back to that. I was like, okay, who or what am I pissed off about? And it took me a really long time to figure that out, partially because I didn't want to admit it. So I was kind of blocking it, but part of it was myself. I was pissed off at myself for taking so long to do my PhD.
Oh, yeah. You never told me that part.
And then, so I had 3 of these lengthy UTIs. Another one was, I was actually pissed off at my supervisor because I actually believed that he didn't do enough to support me. And I found that out sort of towards the end of it when I talked to other PhDs who were like, well, my supervisor's like checking he read my introduction, like my literature review as soon as it was done. And my supervisor refused to read any of it until I had a complete first draft. So I never knew if I was on the right track. I never knew, like we had conversations every 2 weeks, but I felt very unsupported and I was really mad about it. And so this is how I eventually healed that. I went out to my husband's boxing bag and I did multiple sessions where I hit the boxing bag and I started shouting while I hit the bag. And I don't know how many times, I must have done it 4 or 5 sessions of this where I would end up like on the floor on my hands and knees sobbing because I was so upset.
I was
letting out the emotions.
Yeah.
And when I finally did that, I yelled at myself. I yelled at my supervisor. I yelled at mom. I had all this pent up anger at her. And then I did a forgiveness exercise, a Hawaiian Ho'oponopono exercise where I started to forgive. And when I got through that, I got through the UTIs.
So all of that is really fascinating. And I see the link there. We can do so many things that are physical for the physical ailments. But if they are chronic, particularly chronic issues, if they're hanging on and not responding to whatever supplement or medication or whatever it is that you're trying to use to fix it, then you know that there must be something else there. There's a reason your body is still sending the same message. So it's a matter of listening to the message. And one of the things that just a little tip that people can use to sort of, I don't know, as a clue to figure out what's going on. We talked about how your Chinese medicine doctor said, like, who are you pissed at? Like literally the UTI is like, we're talking about
piss.
Right. And some of the other things that, of course, Susan, our energy guru and healer, used for me was always using those metaphors, and they always helped. So, one time I showed up with a cold sore, and actually I think you might have even been the one to say this, like, well, what are you beating yourself up about? So, literally you have this thing that looks like you've been beaten up on your mouth. And I was totally beating myself up about something.
Cold sores also come from like when you're having relationship issues. Like who don't you want to come close to you and kiss you?
Right. Yeah.
When my husband and I broke up, I kept getting cold sores.
Yeah. There's a couple of others that I just want to kind of throw out there because a common one is shoulder, particularly midlife shoulder pain, frozen shoulder, that all like joint pain that comes up during midlife. And so shoulder pain has to do with shoulds. We're always telling ourselves we should be doing this. We should be doing that.
It's literally the spelling of shoulder.
Right. So that's a way to, just a couple of ideas for you. Like there's so many parts of the body that actually have a sort of link to like a metaphor.
Mm-hmm. In our language. Yeah.
Yeah. I have one last little story of my own to sort of show how, first of all, one of the lesser known symptoms in perimenopause and menopause is joint pain. So I had tennis elbow. And so I went to a physiotherapist and I went to the chiropractor. I did all these things. I was taking anti-inflammatory herbs and essential oils, and nothing was quite like it was helping a little bit, but it really wasn't moving the needle as much as I thought it should. After a while, anything chronic, like I said, anything chronic, there's usually an emotional connection to it. So when I finally started to look at what's the emotional connection to this? When did this start? So that can usually be a clue. Like, when did this start? And what's happening, like what was happening at that time in my life? And I realized that it started when we decided to move to the next town over. Then I started to realize I'm not listening to my intuition. I don't actually want to move to that town. That doesn't feel right. And we had an offer on a house there. And as soon as we decided, you know what? I don't think this is the right move. That was when everything shifted. That was when the tennis elbow started to go away. It took a few more weeks to kind of really go away. But as soon as I realized it, as soon as we made the decision, okay, we're not going in that direction. And that's what arms are about. You use your arm to point in a direction, and your elbow is all about the direction of your life. And I didn't want to go in that direction. Literally, I didn't want to go in that direction.
In the direction of that town. That is so cool. Also need to say that we are not advocating for like not going to a doctor, because we need Western medicine and naturopaths and everybody else. But what this understanding your body and your symptoms and what they are telling you is what can support the other things that you're doing.
Yeah, especially if it is something that keeps hanging on, there's usually an emotional, spiritual connection.
Yeah. What it means is that your body is no longer tolerating this misalignment.
Yeah.
There's consequences now.
That's exactly what that was a misalignment. My soul was actually like, I knew my intuition was telling me that this isn't quite right, or at least not now. And I wasn't listening.
And it shows up somewhere in your body. And I think that's part of what it is. It's like it shows up in your body where there's a weakness and where there's an emotional meaning. Like your body's, like your symptoms are like an alarm bell.
And it's when we don't listen that they get louder.
Yeah, it just gets worse. So share that, just to kind of bring it around then, the spiritual connection here is that menopause forces this awakening. It forces us to look at the old ways that we've been operating and to start listening to what your soul wants. And that's why it's like this spiritual awakening. It's not, feels like a crisis because our bodies are out of control, but it's pointing you to your deeper self. It's the time to do this work.
Exactly. That's why I think there's so many women who are sort of awakening and feeling called to do more of this work and feeling like there's something more to it.
So we've got sort of 4 or 5 ways that we can make these parallels really clear between this hormone changes and spirituality. So let's go through those and then we will wrap it up. First one, the hormones protect our body from stress and cortisol. As we said, like they mute the cortisol. And then from a spiritual aspect, this is the protection of your soul from fully facing misalignment. So when you have the raging hormones in your body, it's okay. It allows you to tolerate the misalignment. That's the first one. So that's the first parallel.
It allows us to say yes when we mean no and tolerate the results of that.
Yes. And so then the second one is like, it allows us to push through. It allows us endurance. It gives us endurance.
Right.
But then as they drop, we don't have that endurance anymore. We can't push through.
We try.
Yeah. We keep trying to live that way because we're used to it and it doesn't work anymore. And then that living life where you're out of alignment becomes louder. So the stress becomes louder.
Okay. The next one.
Our hormones mask the signals of discontent before they drop. So when we're young, we can people please. If we're not happy, we can just push it aside because we have these hormones that act as masks. But they also mask our intuitive hits. Like
right.
So many women tell me that they're not intuitive is what they say. What they really are is just disconnected from their intuition. They're not listening because we don't listen to it. We're told not to listen to it.
Well, and that's a whole other episode by itself.
Well, we talked about this when we talked about masculine and feminine energy. Masculine energy tells us to be fact-based and logical. And our general Western society tells us to be that way and don't listen to our intuition. So,
but we could also get into like the witch trials and all of the societal conditioning and the history that has also led us to actually be fearful of our own intuition.
Yeah, it's true. We don't trust it. And it feels unsafe. We don't believe in the safety, or not everybody, but you're right.
Yeah. The witch wound. We all have it.
Yeah. So then the hormonal decline in sex hormones triggers the physical symptoms. So there's a very physical aspect of that. And it triggers this spiritual awakening. So we know that as estrogen drops, our tendency physiologically to want to nurture also declines. And that triggers this, it's not even just a spiritual awakening, it's a desire to focus on self instead of nurturing others.
Yeah. And that's okay. Like this is something that's actually, it's physically happening and it's spiritually happening in your body. And it's normal. I think we resist that because women are supposed to be nurturing. We're supposed to keep, but this is okay. You're supposed to feel like this. You're supposed to start focusing on yourself.
That is so true. Doesn't that just give you permission to allow yourself to nurture your own self or to focus on yourself without feeling selfish anymore? So if you're listening, you have permission. That's it. It's your body actually telling you have permission. So all of these things just buffer against complete collapse. And that, like for me, I had a complete episode of collapse.
Where you couldn't get out of bed.
Yeah. My hormones weren't protecting me against that anymore. And in order to get out of that, I had to step into my own authenticity.
Listening to your soul.
It is. And it's also listening to your emotions. I didn't want to, we are told not to be angry. We're told to be nice, women in the Western world. Be kind, be nice. So then anytime I felt anger or being pissed off at somebody, I pushed it down. And it was all sitting in my bladder because I wasn't allowed to feel those emotions. When I allowed myself to express them to a punching bag, I never expressed them to the actual person that I was angry at. I didn't need to. I just had to feel them and express them.
That's what it's all about, is just feeling them. You have to feel. We suppress so many of our emotions, all the negative ones. And that's like all those emotions, they're chemical reactions. It all sits in your body somewhere.
I guess our overall message here is that your symptoms are a call to listen to your body. They are messages from your body about what needs to be healed emotionally and spiritually, and signals of where you are misaligned from what your soul truly desires.
Right. Which is another way of saying intuition. You're not listening to your intuition. You're not listening to, maybe you don't even know what you desire.
I certainly didn't. I was too busy focused on what everybody else wanted. I didn't even know what I wanted.
Okay. So how can we help women do this?
So if you, our listener, are in the throes of menopause and literally throwing everything at it, like all the supplements, the diet, over exercising, and not seeing the results that you want, then that's a sign that there's likely something spiritual in the way. And the way that we can help you is that if you want to know what's in the way, take our free quiz.
This is brand new.
It's brand new. First time that we are sharing this with the world. It's a quiz that will tell you what your midlife frequency is, your frequency spiritually, and what your body is vibrating at so that you can start to heal.
Perfect. So we'll link that up in the show notes.
Click the link in the show notes now. And next week, we're going to dig into people pleasing and how that is what it does physically during midlife and spiritually. So stay tuned next Thursday when we release that episode. And if this helped you and if you had some aha moments, DM us on Instagram. We would love to hear your aha moments, and share this episode with a friend.